Thank you, Pierce. I appreciate that. And thank you to the North American Infrastructure Leadership Forum for inviting me here today. I'm honored to be on this panel. I don't have decades of expertise in engineering or financing mega projects, but I'm glad to be here because I am really passionate about the importance of infrastructure investment. You can imagine why I would be. I live in North Jersey. Those are the people that I serve. And the Gateway Tunnel project is critical to our future there. I have, in fact, been called the tunnel-obsessed congressperson, a name I wear proudly. And I'm particularly thrilled to be on the panel with Steve Sigmund of the Gateway Development Corporation. I represent North Jersey, as you heard, and so Gateway, again, critically important. The Gateway Tunnel project, including the rehab of the Portal North Bridge, is the nation's most urgent infrastructure project. And mega projects, especially in North Jersey, aren't abstractions. They're necessities for a 21st century economy. The Northeast Corridor, as a region, represents the 5th largest economy in the world. 20,000 commuters use the century-old Hudson River Tunnel to travel in and out of New York each day. It is the linchpin of the passenger rail network, the most heavily trafficked rail corridor in the nation, and it connects train routes in 20 states. A 108-year-old bridge and a 108-year-old tunnel connect the entire Northeast rail corridor. My home area, which produces 10% of our GDP and throughout the broader Northeast Corridor, which produces 20% of our GDP, depends on rail infrastructure that is older than the Titanic. This is the definition of a project of national significance. Yes, mega projects of regional and national importance are expensive. Congress does not like big price tags, so it has frequently kicked the can down the road. And policymakers need to sell these as investment opportunities and focus on the benefits of these transformational projects. According to a study commissioned for the Build America Investment Initiative, improvements on the Northeast Corridor would have a positive benefit-cost ratio and net enormous economic returns over the next 35 years. This is certainly true for Gateway. Steve can probably say more, but I believe even the most conservative estimates indicate Gateway would return more than $2 for every dollar spent. Congress also needs to do a better job of considering the unaffordable cost of inaction. The cost of doing nothing to address the poor condition of the current tunnel is staggering. I hosted a discussion earlier this year with the Regional Plan Association on their report on the Hudson River Tunnel. A planned closure, and likely it wouldn't be planned, a planned closure of half the tunnel would be a $16 billion hit to the national economy over 4 years. It could injure thousands and cost our economy an extra $100 million a day. Think of what that might mean for real estate values and tax revenues. It translates to a $22 billion hit to residential property values in North Jersey. Translates to rising airfares, more pollution, longer commutes, and increased motor vehicle accidents, which will further harm the single most economically productive region in our country. Just as important to my constituents, every deferred decision on the Gateway project means mounting delays on the current system. It risks another episode like in October 2018, when overhead power cables punctured a train car and stranded 1,600 commuters. As a working parent, I know the stress of a delayed train when you're racing to pick up your kids at daycare or make it home to watch a lacrosse game. I am on text change with moms in my community who have been stranded, feverishly working to find someone to pick up their kids. So I'm committed to making infrastructure a bipartisan priority. The FAST Act expires in 2020. The Senate Environment and Public Works Committee got us off to a good start by unanimously approving their reauthorization bill, and I'm optimistic about the House. When I joined other New Jersey and New York members to host Chairman DeFazio for a roundtable discussion on Gateway this year, he guaranteed that he would include projects of national and regional significance in his transportation bill. So I'm committed to working with T&I, not only to advance Gateway, but to make sure we prioritize projects of national significance. We owe the American people no less, and now I look forward to the panel. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Mikie. I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the new generation of leadership that you represent and many of your colleagues, some of my good friends from Virginia who work with you on many of these same issues. I think to your notion about bipartisanship, this morning we heard from Senator Manchin and Senator Murkowski, and they have the same pitch to us, and it's so very important that we recognize that dwindling, but is actually very real, very important for what you do. The next part of this panel is going to be to get a brief overview of the two projects that have been singled out as important mega projects, and perhaps, I think last year this conference designated the Gateway as the #1 project in the country in terms of importance. And we have Steve Sigmund, who's the Chief of Public Outreach for the Gateway program, to give us a brief overview of that project, and we're going to follow that up with Steve Chung. Steve has been leading the efforts for the Terminal One renovation at JFK Airport in this 5th largest economy of the world. Think about what happens if either or both of those were to be constrained or to be put out of service for whatever reason. Very, very important projects. Steve?
Well, thank you. Thank you to CGLA for hosting us and hosting this panel. And I want to particularly thank Representative Sherrill for her, not just for her comments, but for all of her work. The Congress, and really in a bipartisan way, but particularly our delegations in New York and New Jersey fight every day for the Gateway program and have won us a significant amount, over $1 billion in appropriations, money that's currently locked up and not able to be spent, but we can talk more about that a little bit. The Congresswoman did an excellent job of explaining Gateway and Gateway's importance. So I will just very briefly talk about the projects themselves and what we're doing currently to move those projects forward. So Gateway is a series of 9 projects that ultimately is designed to replace that 108-year-old one-track in, one-track out system with a modern 21st century, reliable, safe, and redundant transportation that ultimately doubles capacity under the Hudson River. Right now, when you think about it, the rest of the Northeast Corridor, all the way from Washington to Boston, which, as the Congresswoman said, is about 20% of the nation's economy, is a 4, 5, or 6 track system, right? In its busiest part, in the choke point from Newark, New Jersey to New York, right, which feeds the entire system up to New England and down to Washington, it's one track in and one track out, and it's 109 years old. And so anything goes wrong in that on one track, and you're down to single tracking, anything goes wrong on 2 tracks, and you're out of luck and you're cut off from New York. And the builders of that, those original tunnels, the Pennsylvania Railroad in the early 1900s recognized the importance of connecting New York and New England to the rest of the country, and recognized its importance economically to make New York really what it has become as the economic heart of the country, and recognized its importance to people's lives. And so this has an impact on people's lives, and it has a huge impact on the nation's economy. The benefits are enormous, not just to the ability to travel by train, but also to the rest of the transportation system really in the country. Because when you think about the ports, for example, that feed so much of the nation's economy, from the port of New York and New Jersey, the easing of congestion throughout that area, will ease traffic off of the ports and out into the rest of the country. And the traffic getting worse from an outage in the tunnel, which means traffic on every other mode will get worse, will mean goods movement will get worse. So it has a ripple effect in both directions, in positive or negative. So we're working very, very hard to get the first phase of Gateway done, which is the replacement of the Portal Bridge, as the Congresswoman said, and the construction of the first new tunnel under the Hudson in about 75 years since the vehicle tunnels were constructed, and the rehabilitation of the existing tunnels, so you ultimately have 4 tracks in and out of New York. The most recent things, that has, by the way, a benefit of about, we're about to put out an economic impact report, about 45,000 jobs a year and about $200 billion in total. So, it's real money to not just the region, but the nation's economy. There's a couple things we're in the midst of doing. The biggest piece, obviously, is securing funding. You can't build these things without money, and mega projects are hard to build, and they cost a lot of money. And we have commitments from the states of New York and New Jersey and the Port Authority of almost $6 billion. We have appropriated money from Congress of over $1 billion. We have an Amtrak commitment of $1.5 billion about. What we need is a partner in the Department of Transportation who will, one, unlock some of that appropriated money, and two, give us grant money because of its importance to the nation. We've done an EIS, we're done with it, an environmental impact statement. We finished it 18 months ago, we finished it in 22 months. DOT is holding on to it. There are a number of things we can move forward on if they give us a record of decision. We just established a bi-state commission, so the organization I work for at the moment, the Gateway Development Corporation, is becoming a bi-state commission of New York and New Jersey, the Gateway Development Commission that has 7 board members and will, be part of the flow and light and public life of New York and New Jersey. And we're in the midst of an RFI process with the private sector that's helped us reduce risk, helped us reduce the cost of the new tunnel by $1.5 billion, and is currently working on geotechnical borings out in the middle of the Hudson River right now, today, so that we know the soil essentially in under the Palisades and under the Hudson River, to reduce the risk to private boring companies who come in, so they know what kind of drill bits essentially to use. And so that's all pre-work that we're doing right now, so that we are 150% ready to go on the full construction when we get the funding in place. So thank you all very much for being here and for being interested in this. I particularly like being in this audience because it's not just a New York and New Jersey audience, so I want to emphasize, as the Congresswoman did, the importance of this project to the rest of the country.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve. Stephen, you want to talk about your JFK venture?
Yeah, so thanks very much for the opportunity here at CGLA to introduce the JFK project. So the project itself is the airport that was started by the governor's vision, Governor Cuomo's vision for modernizing the airport at JFK, which is an important gateway to New York and the United States as well. So our specific project relates to Terminal One, which is on the south side of the airport campus. So it's part of so our project is part of a $13 billion redevelopment of the airport, which will consist of our project in the south side of the campus that takes up Terminal 1, 2, and right now Terminal 3, which is at the moment kind of a hard stand operation, what we call an aircraft parking lot. So the project itself focuses on long-haul international traffic, so increase gate capacity from 9 gates currently to 23 gates when it's all said and done. And so with the project this size and working with the Port Authority of New York, New Jersey, there's a lot of complexity involved. And one of the things that we really tried to focus on early on in the process is the local engagement and stakeholder engagement. And so part of the financial sponsors include Carlyle, here based in DC, but also including JLC, which is a joint venture between Magic Johnson Enterprises and Loop Capital, which represents minority investment and opportunities to develop the community for the local Queens community there. And finally, the third financial sponsor is Ulico, which is a labor-owned and managed pension fund out of Chicago. So, with these 3 pillars, what we really focus on is developing benefits that work for the customer, in this case, the Port Authority of New York, New Jersey, so delivering an outcome for them that satisfies that vision, as well as developing positive outcomes for the community. One of the things that we are very, very focused on is developing opportunities for minority businesses, women-owned businesses, and we are focused on achieving and exceeding the target set by the Port Authority of 30%. So that's across all aspects of the project. There are professional advisors to financing, to construction, all the way down the line, even to operation. And so that's a key element in building support for these mega projects. We've been to probably 20, maybe even 30 community events now, explaining the benefits to the community, explaining where the opportunities are. I just came from a concessions symposium out in Queens where we were able to explain a lot of the opportunities that are to come and to help businesses plan for that opportunity that is to come. So the project will kick off, our construction project will kick off early next year. And the first phase of the terminal won't be ready until 2023. So there is an opportunity here for businesses that are interested to start planning for that and get ready for the opportunity that's up and coming. And so, our project maybe to kind of go back a little bit and talk about how it's going to be, developed and financed. Our project, as I mentioned, is about $7.5 billion of this $13 billion plan. It's going to be 100% privately financed, both the debt and the equity. And that requires a lot of support kind of in the background, not only of the local community, but also engagement all the way down the line from the Port Authority, validating our business plan for our airline partners, our bank partners, to help understand what this project means to bring capacity to the New York market, right? So, I'm not sure how many of you have had a chance to fly out of that airport or New York in general, but the airspace is very congested, right? And one of the things that this project, along with the other projects that JFK is going to do, is help alleviate that capacity. There's a lot of time spent on gate. So there's aircraft kind of being delayed either at the terminal or at taxiways or just the surrounding infrastructure, before they get to the runway itself. This project helps to alleviate that, right? With gate capacity, with modern technology implemented into the terminals, with our operating partner. We've actually partnered with Munich Airport, who have a world-class airport, obviously in Munich, that have modern technologies that have a real focus on customer service, all the way down the line from curb to gate. So the security processing, management at the gates, how people board. We're trying to implement some of that technology here for Terminal One and really bring a world-class terminal to the New York area.
Great. Thank you so much for that overview, Stephen. I'd like to turn now to Jason Baer. Jason is a vice president with the Star Companies, an insurance conglomerate, and you're responsible for builder's risk. Yeah. So when you look at these projects, what do you see? And you've got a question, the opportunity to maybe pose a question to these gentlemen. And in particular, given the likely substantial federal role in this, what are the risks to the federal government? So, Jason?
Absolutely. Well, mega projects are always very exciting for insurers. There's always an opportunity for us to be involved. From the builder's risk side, that's meaning that we provide cover for property while under construction if things go terribly wrong. And when things go terribly wrong, obviously you can hear the impact and the importance of these projects. It's very important that they get back up and running as quickly as possible. So in working for Star, who's a global company with, working in 125 different countries, with $20 billion in assets and $5 billion, over $5 billion in revenue annually. It's very important that, somebody of our capabilities and our awareness from other projects around the world, other mega projects that are very similar, we can share best practices, lessons learned, and be there to support these guys when they're trying to build their projects in case, hopefully not. Hopefully everything goes very smoothly and we hope for the best. Their success is our success and vice versa. So, we are always excited about this and just want to be there as a partner for these owners wherever possible. And then, my boss, the owner of the company, Hank Greenberg, is a very influential person who can help move things along and has done a great job in the past of having an impact on helping projects like this get moving in the right direction. So, as I said, we just want to be a partner and try and help out wherever the opportunities are.
Okay. Thank you, Jason. And your mention of sometimes things go wrong. In today's environment, we have a very serious example in Florida with a bridge collapse, in New Orleans with a hotel collapse. Things do go wrong. This is part of the world. So we've got Shalva Marjasvali here, a lot of consonants, is a very senior structural engineer who does focus on risk management here. Shalva, do you want to give us just a quick overview of some risk management techniques on mega projects with multiple disciplines and any guidance or advice you might want to provide to these projects going forward?
Oh, yes, thank you. These projects mega projects are sort of like incredibly complex. There's many people involved, many parties. Every party has their own interest. that's on top of that complication on the engineering. And we always assume that engineering is like, well, engineers going to do their job. We just need to figure out how to fund these things, et cetera. But the complication comes from the fact that there's different parties involved, and every party has their own interest. And very often, this interest is not known to everybody because every party is looking for the profit in the process there. So, so there's some economic drivers. On top of the economic drivers, there's also legal drivers because they're all bound by the legal agreement to complete this project on time, on budget, so to speak, kind of. But what happened in the economic community sort of understood this complexity in the process, and as a result, they developed a contract theory where legal drivers and economic drivers were put together in order to incentivize people to do the teams to do the right thing in the future. And that's because future, it's not really predictable future, right? So you cannot consider every single detail in a contract for the future because it's not possible. So therefore, what you need to do, put a little economic incentive for someone to do the right thing when these unknown things arise. What happens in these two processes, one thing is missing because we're dealing with a real built environment. So whatever we required somebody to do, it also has to be physically possible to build in an environment. So, I mean, to give you an example, for example, we can agree that this table can hover up, but it will never do, no matter how well we agree about these things. So physical environment is very, very important. So these three things kind of come together into very complex environment. So we've been developing few technologies in our firm to kind of understand these complexities and put it in a sort of decision perspective into this series of decision making, the decisions that lead to the sort of good outcomes and decisions that lead towards the bad outcomes. And an idea is to avoid the bad outcomes, kind of stuff like that. So.
Okay. Well, thank you, Shalva, and your colleagues at Hinman have been real industry leaders in capsulizing the risk management. Steve, let me ask you, you've got a very robust and mixed audience here who recognize the national importance of this project. What can a group like this do to get your project to the next phase? Maybe not everything, but what's the next step that would be regarded as success?
Yeah, I'd say a few things. One, we are very serious and committed about working with the private sector on this project, every step of the way. We have an RFI process that's ongoing. We'll continue those things, stake to the firms that are in this room that can participate in those processes, stay connected to them. We had an RFI sort of meeting last summer. Over 200 companies came. So staying connected to the process, I think, directly is part of it. Second is, influencing, talking to your own local congressional representatives to make them understand the importance of a project like this to the nation. Because I think the misconception in the rest of the country can very easily be, oh, this is a New York, New Jersey project. This is a rich area that can pay for this by itself, right? And what's this mean to us, right? So helping your own decision makers and policymakers understand the importance of megaprojects and this megaproject in particular to the nation's economy and to your own work and to your own companies, I think is the most useful thing.
Thank you. Stephen, you're fully funded and you're ready to get started. Is there any advice you can give to mega projects of things that were so very important for you to getting this big project off the ground?
Well, we are fully funded, but it certainly wasn't an easy thing, in terms of advice. I would say starting early, building that local engagement, building engagement all the way up and down the ladder from the local community, explaining what the benefits are, all the way up to the governor and implementing that vision. It's really building that early and local support and delivering, explaining how we can deliver successful outcomes for all parties, right? So I mentioned earlier it was for the customer, so in this case the Port Authority, for the community, and then obviously in the end as well, it's got to be a commercial deal that works for the private sector as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. We've got some time for audience questions. While we're waiting for that to come up, I will put a bug in the Congresswoman's ear. it is about building coalitions. And there are other projects, not nearly to the size or extent of the Gateway project, but I'll cite here right in the Washington area, the Long Bridge, that carries both freight and commuter rail and Amtrak traffic that runs in the Northeast Corridor. Finding other allies like that maybe is a method and a means to, start building some of those bridges underway. Be happy to take you on a tour of the Long Bridge if that would help you guys in those efforts. We have a question back here. Yes, sir.
So primarily for Steve about Gateway, could you speak to the labor force constraints that you guys are anticipating for this project on a technical engineering level, on a construction level? It's been a long time since the U.S. has constructed a tunnel like this, and we're hitting a point where there's a bit of a generational lapse in technical understanding about how to confront this project.
Yeah, so I think, so that's sort of a two-part question. One, in terms of the labor force, I think we have a very good, strong, robust labor force in the market that is really ready to and chomping at the bit to build this, and have done a lot. The rebuilding of the World Trade Center, the work out at the airports, the Goethals Bridge. I think there's a lot of big building that's gone on that gives us a labor force that's ready to do this. On the technical side, that's why we're doing all the work that we're doing now, right? Because understanding, working with the private sector and with the companies that are going to be bidding on these projects, to understand the technical issues and understand the under river environment, which is which nobody's been under for a long time, as you suggest, to understand that before we start drilling. I think that's the reason that we're doing the work that we're doing now.
Congresswoman, did you have any thoughts on workforce and technical availability? Is that part of the debate on infrastructure in Congress, or is it still early in the game?
Well, we're always worried about workforce in the area. A lot of our problems with the workforce are, quite frankly, our infrastructure problems, getting people around the area to the places we need them to be. We have, New Jersey's the most densely populated state in the nation, so we have more scientists and engineers per square mile than anywhere else in the country. That said, getting those engineers and scientists and laborers to the places we need them to go can be difficult. So we have, I think, the workforce we need, but I will say that some of the technical expertise from overseas, from other areas, as we were speaking about before, trying to get the visa, some of the visa constraints lifted so that we can have the best engineers and people from across the world, especially on some of these rail projects, would be helpful. And then I would just add to what Steve said, when people think of this as a regional project, this is a national project in really every sense of the word. And when I talk to other members of Congress, I like to remind them that New York and New Jersey are the two states that give more in federal dollars and get less back for each federal tax dollar than any state in the nation. So really ensuring that we support the economy of the Northeast region so that we can, as taxpayers, continue to fund other infrastructure projects across the nation, I think is also critically important.
Thank you. There's another question out in the audience.
Can I add something?
Sure. Michelle.
So we're having sort of like, I get involved a little bit in forensics investigations as well. So there's this notion in forensics engineering world that every 30 years, sort of like 30-year failure cycle, every 30 years something really happens. And that's because there's a generational gap. The knowledge does not get transferred from people retire, new engineers come in, they don't really, they learn, but not quite as well. And so every 30 years, something really, really happens. Gap kind of occurs. And somebody else in the paper, somebody went and looked into this. The thing is, yes, we have some knowledge in Europe, in other countries, so we bring this back here, but the specifics of this particular project just worries me because it's incredibly complex. When you take one complex situation, apply to another, it may not actually work. And in fact, it could actually lead to some like additional problems. What I'm looking for is sort of like unanticipated problems that we don't really know what's going to come up in a situation. So design issues, finances issues, and everybody, yes, everybody's eager to start this project, but we need to find out why are they eager to do these things. All these different parties You know, it's just incredibly complex and interesting problem.
Yeah. That's a great point. And, you know, so much in the construction and engineering industries, there was a great talent loss in the crash of '08. People left, they aged out, they never came back. And so this issue of workforce, you hear about it in other arenas, is a very real issue. Is there one more question out there?
Hi, yes. I think we all understand the importance of the Gateway project, and there was a little bit of discussion about this yesterday, but I can't remember a more politicized project in recent memory than the Gateway program. So I'd be interested in what the panel thinks about how we take the politics out of selecting these infrastructure projects that are obviously so important to the entire country.
All right, so that's a loaded question, but I think there's only one person capable of answering that, and we do promise to close right at 11. So, Congresswoman, last word.
Oh, fantastic. Yes, I agree with you, and certainly, this is not a political question as in the region. So every member that I've spoken to of the New York and New Jersey delegation, Republicans and Democratic alike, see the need for this. This is more a political discussion at kind of higher levels. And, I would love to see us looking at some metrics to take some of the politics out of it. In other words, how much of the economy it would impact, the population size it would impact, some of those critical features for how we kind of rack and stack these projects. In a way I can't understand, this is not even in the top 10 most important infrastructure projects as the Department of Transportation has laid out, which I think everyone in this room understands does not make sense in any sense of the word. So I would love to get the politics out of some of this, and I think it's going to be critical as we go forward with these mega projects in this country. Needs infrastructure investment, and we need to do it in a way that's going to maximize our tax dollars. Coming from a state that incessantly talks about our tax dollars, I can guarantee that the American people are not going to have the appetite to get these done if we're inefficient about them or spending our money in a way that doesn't make sense to the population.
So, Congresswoman, I've just been advised we've got a few extra minutes, but I know you do have a hard stop. Do you have another 5 minutes to stay on stage and answer one more question from the audience, or do you need to
I can do one more question,
okay.
Certainly.
Another question
about
from
my
the
favorite
audience?
topic.
I see one hand in back, please.
Maybe it's just a variation on the last question. But we'd all be just recovering from the party, from the ribbon cutting ceremony and the tunnel that would have been that Governor Christie killed. So what inoculates Gateway against another late run assassination?
That's a great question. I think that's a great question. I will tell you, of course, I was in New Jersey when I was commuting at the time into New York when that tunnel was canceled and that project was canceled. And I was appalled. But I will tell you, I don't think my level of angst was shared by a lot of other people in New Jersey. I don't think people were quite as concerned. I think two things inoculate this project. I think the first thing is things have gotten really bad. So Superstorm Sandy really damaged our tunnels. So the commute in and out has gotten horrible. There is maintenance that goes on about 4 hours a night in the middle of the night, and that doesn't account for shutting down the electricity to the tracks, for getting, the tunnels are very narrow. So if you look at other rail tunnels where you have equipment to the side, you don't have that gateway, you don't have that in our Hudson River Tunnel. So you have to track them in, you have to track them out. They are falling apart. At a fairly rapid rate, it feels like. I've been in them, they're a mess. So the commute for people in North Jersey has steadily degraded to the point where I was desperate the other night to get my husband home because he had to pick up the kids. I dropped one off at one thing and I was somewhere else and he was gonna pick him up at La Crosse. And he texts me, my train just got canceled, but don't worry, I think I can make the next one. This train just got canceled too. I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I mean, he's stranded in New York. So these are happening with more and more frequency to commuters. I have a commuter in my district who now takes trains 2 hours earlier than 2 trains earlier than he used to ensure that he gets to meetings on time. So I think what really inoculates this is I don't think a governor of New Jersey at this point could cancel this project. and still get reelected
Not
or
stay governor,
not,
yeah.
or stay governor, right? It would be, it has gotten that bad in the community.
The other piece, I agree with all of that completely, and I too was a commuter during the ARC project, and I actually was the head of external affairs at the Port Authority for that project, and we had all the stakeholders supporting that piece. We had all the funding in place. We had the EIS in place, et cetera. What we didn't have was a federal partner, right? And that didn't exist at the time, and that's why it's so important. It's so important for this project to recognize that it's federal importance, the fact that these are federal assets, they're owned by Amtrak, and that it is something that matters for the rest of the nation, right? So that you can't just have a local, something happen locally that that makes it go south. But the other piece is, and I think it's to Mikey's point, is that when I went through that process, there were a lot of sort of detractors for that project, kind of advocate types who said, that's the train to Macy's basement, and it's too expensive, et cetera. So we've corrected for those things. For one, this goes to Penn Station and not to Macy's basement, but also there's so many more advocates and commuters on the side of having to build something because the experience has gotten so much worse. And so we're either going to do it the right way, which is proactively the way we're trying to do it, or the wrong way, which is a tube is going to shut down. And a tube shuts down, and that'll inoculate against the problem because people will recognize how much it needs to be built, because life will get very, very hard around there, and it'll have a big impact on the national economy.
Jason, did you have a very short comment on the politics question?
There's not much I can say on the politics. I mean, having experience overseas, my 4 years in London, I saw things like move differently around the world and was always impressed with it. And it's very difficult to come back here and see the issues that kind of pop up. But, the hope is that the influence of my boss, once again, Hank Greenberg, hopefully can help point things in the right direction where we can. I mean, that's the only influence as insurers that I can even comment on, because the rest of it, as a New Yorker living in the city, I suffer these problems on a daily basis.
There's a number he can call at the White House.
Yes.
It'd be great. I'll give it to you.
I'll talk to Joe Dillon's probably in the room somewhere. I'll just talk to him.
If I made
Yes,
something, we're all talking about like throwing more money at a problem. But sometimes throwing more money is not going to solve because problem is too complex. And then we'll get surprised why this project gets canceled. Because it is just too complicated. And what we need to do, we need to understand and go through the complexity in the right way.
I recognize your point of view on this, and I agree that these are very complex projects. There's a reason they haven't been built in a long time. But the project that the questioner was referring to was not canceled because of its complexity. It was canceled because of politics. It was canceled because Chris Christie was elected to be the governor. It had been John Corzine's project. Chris Christie promised not to raise taxes for the Transportation Trust Fund.
We could go on about New Jersey politics all day. We could do this for hours.
It wasn't but my point is only it wasn't the complexity.
And most of the money now has been allocated. I mean, this now we're just waiting for it to really be released to get started, a lot of it.
Yeah, that's right. And we're not just throwing money at it. I mean, we've just cut $1.5 billion from the project, so.
Right, and so I would say to the question about politics, I think the trick is not how to get politics out of infrastructure, it's how to make infrastructure good politics. And so someone who goes home and says, I can reduce your commute time, or I can make it at least more predictable, or I can prevent that bridge from falling down, that's good politics. People understand that. That's our challenge here as an industry, is to, we've got to do a good job professionally. We have to represent our companies or our agencies, but we have to make infrastructure good politics. And right now it's in a mixed gray place, right? We need to be that island of sanity in this difficult world. So please, let's have a hand for these great panelists and the great work they're doing. Yeah, really good to meet you.